you can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. We can see, all these great pitchers they had that, we did not expect. No one expected Travis Wood to come out and have the kind of season he's had. No one expected Carlos Villanueva to be as good as he's been. So, to suddenly be kind of in the mix for big trades coming up to the deadline and stuff like that, and hopefully getting some younger arms, and we're starting to see more and more of our prospects highly rated by Baseball America and other publications and stuff. So it's kind of like, it's rewarding for like hanging in there the last 3 years, because you're finally starting to see the results of like watching this team just be terrible for the last 3 years.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really unbelievable how everything has kind of gone full circle. I mean, this farm system is getting better and better. As someone who really follows the Cardinals pretty closely, we're at a point where I think the Cubs will be in a few years, honestly. I mean, they're building the farm system right. You got to trust Theo and Jed. I mean, the middle infielders that they have, the left side of the infield, and then the arms that they're bringing up, very impressive. Now, I thought the Cubs would go more in the direction of pitching with their top picks the last few years, so I am a bit surprised with some of these draft picks, but I cannot be more impressed with Albert Almora. We'll see what Chris Bryant does, a huge, huge contract there. And Javier Baez Jr. Lake, I mean, it begins to question whether Starlin Castro, who was seemed to be a franchise player a few years ago, still very young and can reach his prime, whether he'll even be on the team in 4 or 5 years with all of these prospects coming out. But again, right now they're still prospects. So the first question is, I guess, when you're looking at this Cubs at the trade deadline, obviously they're sellers. They're the biggest sellers out there, along with their, across the city, White Sox. Some big trade pieces. The biggest, Matt Garza, who the rumors reports obviously that he'll be traded by the end of the week. There's a guess about an 80% chance, but he's actually not been the Cubs' best pitcher this year. If he was healthy the whole year, I would say probably yes. But Jeff Samardzija, huge, and Travis Wood obviously acquired in the Sean Marshall deal, was kind of projected to be a frontline starter with the Reds. Never really profiled that way with the Cubs, but still a very young guy, and he's really starting to reach his prime, so we're hearing extension talks there. But getting back to Matt Garza, you're looking at the Indians, you're looking at the Cardinals. They would be trading within division with that, especially with the Cardinals farm system. You're looking at the Rangers. Now, the Rangers have tried to trade for him multiple times before. Who do you see at this point being the kind of biggest suitor for Matt Garza?
Good question. It's really funny because when Jim Hendry was the GM of the Cubs, there were leaks everywhere as to what was going on, and everyone always knew what was going on. Reporters always had all this inside information, and Theo and Jed have come in and really kind of locked everything down. And when we do see rumors coming out about who's going where, they tend to come from the national guys. They don't really come from the local Chicago people. So. Yeah. We're all trying to figure out what's going on. I have a feeling that the Rangers are still the biggest suitors. Apparently the Diamondbacks have snuck in there as well. We had been hearing earlier in the week that the Blue Jays were one of the lead, people in the mix, but they've sort of fallen off. So I think most of us still have a feeling that they're either going to go to he's going to wind up with the Rangers or the Diamondbacks, but at this point, if there's going to be, a dark horse who sweeps in at the last minute and steals them out from under everyone, we don't know. I know that what Theo and Jed are hoping for is something along the lines of what the Milwaukee got for Jack Greinke. So, it's not going to be probably a rental. It's going to be someone that's going to sign him to a long-term deal. It's going to be able to give up some significant prospects for him.
Yeah, and I mean, judging by the Rangers, which I agree with you there, I see them as kind of the biggest threat. I mean, they've built up an incredible farm system, and they've done really well with the pitching that they've had this year. I mean, there's been a lot of injuries. I'm surprised they've done so well. So, you add Garza to the mix, going back to the AL, I think he would be a good fit with Texas. And Texas is not an organization to get a rental. They would be one to put the money down. They didn't sign Josh Hamilton. They'd say, hey, look, this is a guy, he's in his prime. We'll sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal, and let's make it happen. So I do see the Rangers as kind of being one of those teams. But the Cardinals also have a lot of payroll flexibility, and with a farm system, they could definitely be kind of more of a surprise team considering, it doesn't seem like they would trade with the Cubs. Honestly, they don't want to give up their top prospects. But if Chris Carpenter ends up being a reliever when he comes back instead of a starter, you can look at Matt Garza saying this could be the missing piece of a very young team. So we'll see what happens there, though. But a few more things here. I mean, the Cubs, what they've been able to do is sign some free agents and create some value for them. One guy that they have not created too much value for in the past few years, but this year looks a little brighter, is Alfonso Soriano. Now, unfortunately, this is obviously, one of the last years of the contract, and the money is not as much of an issue as it was a few years ago, and they would still be eating up most of the contract anyway if they were to be able to trade him. But do you see Soriano, is this finally the year where he's actually traded? I mean, there's some teams looking for DHs out there. the Giants, even the Giants could be looking at an outfielder. They try to get, they signed Jeffrey Core. Doesn't look like he would be much of an offensive upgrade with Pagan out. Looking for some different bats in the outfield. He's had a pretty decent year and can provide actually a lot of value to some teams looking for that utility guy, some platoon situation, a DH type. Do you see this year that Soriano is traded, or do you just say, hey, you know what, just keep him on the Cubs, let him finish out the contract?
I don't think he's going anywhere. The thing is that, the fans have really held that contract against Soriano, that 8-year deal he got, when I think at the time that, the most anyone else was offering was 5 years, and the Cubs gave him 8.
Yeah.
He was brought in to win the World Series, and it just kind of all fell apart, and he's sort of taken the brunt of it. It's kind of funny though. I mean, he's just kind of kept on keeping on, and he always does. He always hits well. His defense has been spotty. He is streaky, but at the end of the year, his numbers always look pretty good. And fans, I think, have sort of come around to Soriano. And there's really no benefit to us trading him. We don't have anyone ready to plug in that spot. He's not holding anybody back. He's not blocking anyone from coming up. We're going to wind up paying most of his salary anyway, even if we trade him. So he's actually a really great role model for the kids. He likes to take the young kids under his wing and sort of show them the ropes and keeps them out of trouble and shows them good work ethic and stuff. So people are have kind of come around on him and are like, oh, let's just keep him and let him play out his remaining 2 years and have him around to be a great influence. The thing, too, is that no matter if the Cubs do want to trade him, last year he had the chance to go to the Giants and put the kibosh on it before the Giants even made an offer. So, he doesn't necessarily want to go anywhere. I don't think – one of the things that we've heard the past couple of days is that Soriano and Garza could go together to the Rangers. We've always thought the Rangers would be kind of an obvious trading partner for the Cubs with Soriano.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it never worked out. So that's one of the rumors that's kind of swirling around in the air, but to be honest, I'm not even sure where that came from. So My guess is that he's probably going to be here. I'd be surprised if they move him.
Yeah, I mean, when you talked about the rumors, at this point, some of them are worthless, but I would say, obviously, with the Rangers, it's kind of an obvious suitor there, and they've tried to trade for him before, too, so that's kind of the big one there. But when you're looking at the Soriano thing, I mean, it really isn't a situation like Aramis Ramirez where he was kind of being a bad role model to the younger guys, and like you said, they would be paying most. So I can see where you're coming from there. There's really no point of trading him. One guy, though, that there's probably likely, if there's a deal for a hitter to be traded, is Nate Scherholtz. Now, they bid out the Yankees to actually get Scherholtz before, and now the Yankees could even be a suitor, which I think is kind of interesting. But finding value in some of these rentals, that's extremely important for the Cubs. They signed Scott Harrison, they trade him. So that's kind of what the Jed Hoyer and obviously the Epstein, what they're doing for the Cubs, getting some rentals, trying to find value out of them. But Travis Wood could be a guy to sign an extension. Jeff Samardzija has really come up big for the Cubs. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, though, is this farm system. I mean, they're really starting to scare some people in a few years with Javier Baez and, Junior Lake, and you have Chris Bryant, who will come up in a few years on that left side of the infield. Do you see Starlin Castro still being a big part of this Cubs organization in 3 years, or are you part of the people that kind of say, hey, let the kid get a break, he'll figure it out, he's extremely young, or are you kind of part of the group that says, hey, in a year or two, if these prospects are ready, Starlin Castro might not be fitting with this organization?
I'm kind of in the middle. I mean, I do think that the fans are way too hard on him. He is still a kid, and, he makes stupid mistakes. But, he's shown he's got great patience to the plate when he chooses to exercise it. And I really think he's sort of, a lot of that frustration that was sort of voiced on Soriano has now been sort of sent Castro's way. We're not losing games because of Soriano or because of Starlin Castro, and even if we were, it doesn't matter because this year is, in the tank anyway. So, I'm all for just let the kid play and get off his back. At the same time, it's kind of hard to ignore all these kids coming up, and obviously there isn't room for everybody. So, there was a lot of talk when we signed Chris Bryant is, what's he going to do? Is he going to go to third? And then if he's at third, what do you do with Baez? And then if Baez is going to play short, which what Theo and John have said, he's the best true shortstop in the system. What do you do with Starlin Castro? So no one really knows. We sort of think that they'll try to transition Chris Bryant someplace else, maybe into left field. Who knows? But I think it's kind of a mix. I mean, someone's going to have to be moved around, or someone's going to have to be moved. And if Baez and Bryant come up and they're still playing short and third, then that makes, depending on what's going on with Starlin, makes him expendable. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Obviously, Baez and Bryant are still young enough that they can be moved around if we need them to. So I guess we'll just kind of wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, Bryant was really drafted for the offense, so he could easily profile as a corner outfield. And if that happens, you have Albert Almora, you have Chris Bryant, you have Starlin Castro, assuming he's in his prime, 27, 28 at that point, Rizzo, who they're building around. I mean, Javier Baez, there's just, the list goes on of young guys that can really be a part of this core, and Matt Garza does not seem to be a part of that core. It kind of seemed obvious, and I'm really glad that everything has worked out the way it has, because if they were trying to trade him last year, he had the injury problems, it didn't work out, I felt bad. You know, the Ryan Dempster deal, they're about to get maximum on him, and they end up settling kind of for seconds, although Vizcaino could be a big part of this Cubs rotation in a few years, you know, coming back from Tommy John surgery. But, you know, now seems the perfect time for Garza to be traded. His stock could not be higher, although he is going to be a free agent. There's no controlled years there. You know, we've seen some pitchers get, you know, $20 million per season as a sub-500 pitcher. Garza could have a big contract headed his way, looking at what Anibal Sanchez got last year. I mean, he can provide a ton to a playoff team. He's been in the AL East. He knows how to pitch there. So I think it's the best situation for the Cubs to trade him. And, you know, really looking past the trade deadline and looking at this first half, as a Cubs team, I think I'm very impressed with what they've been able to do. Are you overall kind of pleased with their first half performance? I mean, they're 9 games under 500, yes, but it could have been a lot worse. Have you seen some positive signs of Cubs play, at least this first half?
Yeah, I think we have. I mean, obviously the pitching staff, like I said, is just way above and beyond anything that we expected. You know, we thought, you know, we just didn't expect any kind of, like, the season that Travis would have had. And I think there's always kind of this lingering fear among the fans that Jeff Samardzija is going to revert to the old Jeff Samardzija, and that it was just going to be a one-season thing where he was actually decent. So we've really been happy with the pitching. And then, you know, I think one of the things that people are really encouraged by is Theo and Jed's ability to bring in these players that are kind of cast off from other players, to see value in them, to get them some playing time and sort of make their value apparent to everyone and then flip them. So, you know, players, you know, guys like Nate Scherholtz that, you know, have had really good seasons, that's kind of encouraging, because you know, while you don't necessarily see great play from the everyday players, although, you know, there's a lot of games that they've lost by 1 run, or the bullpen imploded, and that's what, you know, so there are some flashes of future, I don't want to say brilliance, but at least decent play going on that we see every once in a while. But I think the big thing is that when you see things sort of coming together the way that they have, it gives us confidence that Theo and Jed really kind of know what they're doing. Because, of course, there are people who thought they were going to come in and flip and everything was going to change and be better by, like, 2013. And, you know, and so those people were kind of starting to kind of squawk a little bit loudly in the off season about how they didn't know what they're doing. And so when you see them be able to pick up these guys and flip them for prospects, and you see the trade market coming together for Garza the way it has and stuff, it just kind of gives us all overall a sense that, you know, they're in control. They know what they're doing. We're going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit of patience.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just one last question, Julie, because I'm intrigued by what you're doing here. I saw there's some nasty comments on Twitter, just kind of aimed at your gender. How much do you get that? I mean, you're part of this baseball world. You're obviously working for ChicagoNow. You're founder of AerysSport. How much judgment do you get just based on your gender alone, and how have you dealt with that? Has that made you just be like, you know what, I'm going to prove people wrong. I'm going to be a standout in this baseball community?
I think all of us women get it. You know, I mean, all the way, you know, Jane McManus gets it, Maggie Hendricks gets it, from Joe Rogan. I mean, we all get it. It's, but, you know, luckily there's so many women out there who are just fantastic writers that are sort of lead the way for everyone. That, you know, it's not really, I don't think any of us feel like we're in it alone. We feel like we're kind of, you know, there's sort of this sorority out there of us that get it on a regular basis, and you just kind of learn to ignore it. And, you know, after a while, you show that you know what you're talking about, and you show that, you know, you're reasonable in what you write about and what you talk about. And I do a lot of goofy things on my site, but on Twitter, I try to stay relatively focused on news and, you know, and valuable information. And after a while, those voices kind of, you know, drown out a little bit. So I don't get it nearly as much as I used to. I hope that's true for all women who are writing about sports on the internet. So yeah, I mean, those people are out there. I mean, look at the stuff that they say, you know, that what happened during the Trayvon Martin thing. You know, those are all kinds of the same people that just say these outrageous things that you're just shocked that anyone would even say that out loud. So it's not just women; it's a huge, you know, faction of society that gets it from these freaks on Twitter and everywhere else, and you just kind of get used to it, I guess. And you know, and every day there's more and more women writing about baseball, and more high-profile women writing about baseball. So, you know, we're getting there.
Yeah, and you talked about it. You showed what you know that you know what you're talking about. Obviously,